So welcome to the panel on diversity. I'm joking. Mike told me I had to open with a joke, so that's my joke. No, if you guys do not know me, I am Dayna Moon. I run revenue and partnerships for Beeler.Tech. Beeler.Tech is a global community, bring together publishers, brands, media owners to both engage, talk about tech platforms, but also to learn from each other, best practices and things like that. And we also do events. If you guys have not heard, we'll check those out later. But I will let my esteemed colleagues introduce themselves. Mr. Rasick.
Mike Rasick, the president of Prebid. She never pronounces my name right.
I don't.
I don't know why.
Talking about names that you can't pronounce, I'm Chen, but everybody calls me Chen. I'm the co-founder and CRO of Rise, an SSP and a full SaaS solution for publishers.
Hi guys, I'm Saiful Ahmed. I'm SVP of AdTech at OMG Global.
Hi guys, I'm Jeff. I am the VP of Product at Human.
There will be human jokes that come later as well. So transparency and trust, two keywords we see routinely in the trades and of course in conversations that we have on a daily basis. I want to start with each of you and hear from all of you. Well, hear from all of the panelists really what this panel is about. So enhancing publisher performance through transparency. If each of you could give an example or talk to an example of how your teams, or specifically externally with a client for Saiful, how you've bought best practices, what you're contributing to the ad fraud, to mitigate ad fraud overall. Saiful, we'll start with you actually.
Oh, cool. So I'll give you a good example. We have what we call the OMG ATF, and for my US friends and colleagues, it's probably not what you're thinking. It's the Accountability Transparency Framework, which is a legal binding agreement we expect all of our partners to sign. And it has two guiding principles. The first one is about pushing through transparency within the programmatic supply chain and then protecting the programmatic trading ecosystem from bad actors. We at OMG believe that we should give our clients full disclosure into media tech and data costs and domain level reporting, and that's important. And hopefully that level of transparency sets us apart from our competitor set. And just to bring that to life with three quick examples, platform deliverables, we expect our DSP partners to remove any unauthorized seller or reseller publisher inventory, and any reseller found to be doing this needs to be blocked from bidding on a OMG DSP seat. And then the second one is transparency in fees, where we expect our partners to disclose any tech costs and any trading fees, otherwise known as buy-side margins that sit outside the OMG contract. And then lastly, the ad fraud compensation. So we expect our partners to compensate us and our clients for any of our ads that serve against fraudulent inventory.
So maybe I'll continue because I feel like our service is very complementary to what you've just said. So our role in the industry is basically to put a question mark on everything that is within programmatic. And a lot of the things that we're doing actively is going to publishers, going to SSPs and asking them, what is being passed? Do you know as a publisher how an SSP or DSP classify your inventory? I can give you one example. Sometimes publishers want to be very specific and specify their traffic as a sports site, as maybe sometimes football or soccer, depends on which country. And the SSP or the DSP decides to take something that is much more broad, to take it to entertainment, to take it to something that will basically contain more inventory. So we actually really ask from publishers and SSPs to ask their partners what are they passing, and really give transparency to both sides into what is the segmentation and what is the value of each request and request. So I think it helps a lot in terms of what you just described.
I know you've contributed a lot.
You want me to go first? Okay. For me, it's simple because we're pre-bid. Everything we do is transparent, right? So the way we set up our tech, it's to solve problems for publishers, right? And to allow publishers to connect to the rest of the marketplace, SSPs, DSPs, identity companies, it doesn't matter who, in a transparent way. And that way, we set up specific rules to protect publishers, quite frankly, from certain things that they don't understand that could be happen, like local data storage. And when you build into pre-bid, you have to follow the rules. After that happens, it's basically between the publisher and the tech partner to work out the commercials. But that's literally all you have to worry about if you're connecting through the pre-bid pipes. Right, we're working now with Jeff. I'll give Jeff a nice plug. Working now with Jeff because traditionally pre-bid has shied away from ad fraud. For a lot of different reasons, we see it and we kind of know who's doing what. And part of it was we didn't feel it was our job as a not-for-profit to be the police, right, on who's doing ad fraud. The last 2 years, we've kind of seen it getting too egregious. So we are working with Human on something that we're going to be bringing out into the marketplace probably by the time we do our summit in October. We'll probably announce something there that will be our way of combating fraud, but using the same thing, right, where it'll be transparent and it'll be publishers signing up for something into the base code, and it'll basically force the marketplace to react and work in a certain way.
Mike took my example, so maybe I shouldn't have let you go first. But no, I think the trust and transparency theme of this chat really resonates with virtually everything that we do at Human. So, I mean, every single product set that we have is really about promoting the trust through data and by sharing data about what's actually going on with the traffic that's being purchased, and also on the inverse side, which is probably less talked about, but the ads that are coming through. So, there's this notion of transparency, and a lot of times we talk about like publisher transparency. So, what environment is this ad running on? Is it running on a bot, or are there other problems with it? But there's a flip side to this, and Human has in a unique spot to basically be able to look at both sides of it. But there's plenty of things that come through from the advertising side as well, and looking through transparency in terms of what is being served, what are those creatives doing, how are they doing that, is just as important. In terms of, I guess, to continue the shameless plug, as we look towards the future. We've been partnering with Prebid to try and surface ways to work directly with publishers and be a little bit more transparent. Human has traditionally been not as transparent. Obviously, very transparent with our customers, but not as transparent with kind of the rest of the ecosystem. So we want to work, with everyone to see how we can continue to grow together.
So none of you guys mentioned SPO. We actually just had a summit with Chris Kane, who we went through a deep dive. I had a little fun with ChatGPT, and of course we'll talk about AI a little bit later. If not, we might have been kicked out of this. So I asked ChatGPT to give me 5 best practices around SPO. 1, implement and enforce ads.txt. No-brainer. Optimize ad inventory and placement. No-brainer. Leverage header building. No-brainer. Number 4, ensure high-quality traffic. And then 5, foster strong relationships with demand partners. Again, no-brainer. Saiful, this is a little bit for you. When we had our prep call, you brought up the idea, and I think you guys are practicing this internally, of media quality.
Yeah.
Like, walk us through that, because that's a big, obviously you're representing the buy side, right? Want to know what advertisers are doing, how they're being held accountable, what the focus is. It's a big piece for like the publishing community in general.
Yeah. So, media quality is important to us, right? Media quality, I should start off with saying, is not cheap. And clients value media performance over campaign pricing efficiencies. They essentially want more of their money spent on quality inventory and less on tech and data. The historical way of evaluating media quality on a single metric doesn't always work. So for us, it's about reviewing that and assessing it through a framework analysis. So it goes beyond a single metric itself, and it needs to focus more outside of the if the ad was viewable and the context it was viewable in, but also the associated performance it's contributed to the campaign itself. That's important for us. So effectively, it's bringing together viewability, brand safety, and fraud, and ROI. Importantly, we definitely need a combination of quantifiable metrics that go across all of the media channels.
So to continue, I think SPO is something that could be a huge success or a huge disaster. And SPO is based on data. A lot of times when we discuss with SSPs or publishers, what is their strategy on what you've mentioned about ads.txt? How do you decide who's authorized, who's not authorized? How can you decide basically what was the outcome? I hear publishers saying, I removed a few partners and I saw a huge increase. And then I'm asking them, based on what? SPO has to be based on data. AI, that we will touch base later on, is everything around data. And I think that a company that doesn't contain analytics or data science people within their team, it will be very difficult for them to take any decision around supply path optimization. And sometimes it's better not to do supply path optimization, rather doing it in the wrong way and passing inventory that is not relevant for any of the buyers.
Yeah, so I could tell you, you could get the data right now through pre-bid. Most of the publishers, because it's people don't understand, it's not data that is in any way or shape usable, right? You need a data scientist to come in and figure out what the anomalies are, and you have to figure out patterns, and you got to do that over time. Right now we have an initiative that's going on to actually take that and make it usable for publishers in a way that they don't need a data scientist. But we won't do the supply path optimization for them, but we will kind of give them the signals that will allow them to make their own choices. But you still have to understand the choice you're making, because if you make not every publisher will run the same business, and some of them think that's the way it's going to work, that it's one path for all of them. And the reality is based on how they run their businesses and how they are selling their media overall, both direct, indirect, whatever they're doing, greatly impacts the choices they're going to make in SPO, right? Some of the decisions they make will go against what the data is telling them to do, right? So you can't kind of automate it the way most publishers are thinking.
I think most of it's been said, but I would say I echo the data piece, and it all goes back for the publisher's perspective. It really goes back to knowing what you're actually putting into this ads.txt file and really understanding that. I mean, we see so many these days that just have thousands and thousands of lines. They get a new partner, they put it in, they never go back and update anything. And so, obviously working with a partner like Rise or somebody like that, you guys are monitoring the stuff more closely, but, we see all kinds of things. And so, if you want to be proactive as a publisher and help to mitigate this problem overall, like it starts with that and understanding what's going in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a basic thing that most publishers don't understand, that
Yeah.
buyers will usually stop at like 100 lines,
yeah.
right? And they put 1,000 in there. And then they start questioning why they're not getting, like why the buyers aren't picking up certain things or categories. And like, if you don't have a data scientist, if you're not using someone like Rise, they're just stuffing that, right? It's just like a giant ID for them, for lack of a better term, is the way they're using it. And no buyer is going past 100 lines, right? So
But
And also,
also,
if you
what's
like-
the difference between 10, 100, or 1,000 lines? At the end of the day, the question is what's behind? Who's authorized and what is he doing?
Yeah.
The word reseller is being used across the board, but if we have around 50 or 60 different SSPs that are working with the same 5 to 10 DSPs, isn't that reselling? What's the difference between one SSP to another? What makes them unique? I think that, ads.txt was an easy solution for publishers because it was really clear. You should look if it's direct or reselling, take only direct, and you're covered. But all of those direct partners, they're selling to the same partners behind them, doing things in the back end, and they didn't take it one step ahead to really ask, okay, what's behind this methodology of ads.txt? What's behind the methodology of being a reseller, and deciding really who they want to work with based on transparency, based on the level of technology, based on the level of data this company is holding. So I feel like sometimes we're starting a process, but we're not closing it. And I think maybe it's because we're not really looking on the whole flow, from the advertiser to the agency to the DSP, SSP, and the publisher itself. Another thing I want to touch based about SPO and why I think supply path optimization became so crucial from the buying side, from the DSP and SSP side, and not necessarily from the publisher side, is the costs. A few years ago, it was much more fun. We were a lot of companies. It was really easy to make money. We were focusing about having fun and just doing great business. And it became harder and harder. DSPs became more aggressive. Some DSPs are deciding to become SSPs. Some SSPs are not declaring it, but they're becoming DSPs. And we're seeing a lot of companies merging. We just saw another 2 SSPs merging lately. But the costs of requests that are being sent to an ad server without bringing a return of impressions and revenues became very, very, very heavy. And companies that weren't efficient, and last year the word sustainability was part of every discussion. It was like AI of 2023. This year we got a hard stop of not discussing sustainability. I don't know, maybe the world is much better after last year.
we
Privacy
can talk about the
Sandbox took over the
car.
conversation.
But I won't touch it. Dayna
Announcement.
told me not to touch sustainability. But sustainability is being efficient, and efficient being profitable. And in order to be profitable, you need to do supply path optimization that will make sure that you're sending the right request to the right buyer that will get you a return for your investment. That's the story. And it just became more difficult, and this is why we are talking about it more and more. And the whole ecosystem wants to be more efficient. On the publisher side, because the ad server costs are not as high, they're not seeing all of those requests that are being sent to SSPs and DSPs, it's less of a problem for now.
Yeah, the pushback from the publishers now, and the reason SPO is becoming important to them is because of latency, right? And when you start looking at cookie deprecation, privacy laws, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's adding time to a page. And when a publisher has 50 partners running tags, right, you're firing a tag, and to your point, there's nothing happening. Tags just firing, requests are going, but there is no revenue being generated from that, or there's nothing being generated from that, except that the partner you're working with is collecting data on what's happening on that page, right? And it's a continuous loop of data going back to whichever partner that is, right? Usually it's like a yield management company or one of the resellers. So for us, the big thing around the big push on SPOs make publishers understand that eventually you're going to have to choose, right? That it's not just you have 15 partners and optimally you will work with 15 partners. It's probably going to be you're going to work with 7 partners, right? Because these 7 partners bring a unique value to you and are selling in differently to an SSP, or they're bringing something to you that's incremental demand that is not something you're already doing, where a lot of these guys are just firing pixels and going and trying to resell the same inventory at a higher price or a lower price or whatever they're doing, and that's where the cost gets hit on the SSP side.
So I want to put a question mark there, because this was the decision of most publishers. Instead of working with 60, let's lower it down to 12 or 15, and then we're efficient. And if you think about it, if an SSP is really good in Europe, or another SSP is really good in APAC, and 20 others are really good in the States, why should I choose the same 7, 10, 15 partners in the same stack? Most publishers that I talk with are using an open source, because Previd made it very easy to implement an open source. Then they developed like a few layers within the company for SPO and FPO, so it won't be really, without any technology embedded inside. But they have the same problem that every auction, they're calling all of those 12 partners or 15 partners regarding if the specific segment from the US Android specific version is relevant. Why should I call an SSP that is very good in Europe as part of an auction that is being held in the States? Why not choosing who is the right relevant partner to a specific segment? And I think that this is the next phase. It's not removing, adding, deciding on a certain number. Bring whoever you want. You need someone that will choose for you what's the best scenario for every segment. Then you can onboard 60, 100, or 150, but you have something that is based on data. And I'll come back to data because I think that sometimes we forget that is AdTech. It's not only the advertising ecosystem, it's based on tech, and you'll never find a trader in the stock exchange that is taking decisions based on hunch. It's always based on data, what they want to invest. It has to be the same also when you're doing an auction in ads.
That's kind of a perfect segue into AI, because again, we have to talk about it or we wouldn't be here. I can speak from a publisher perspective because the concept of AI has dominated so many conversations. Publishers, brands, they're all on a different journey. They're on a different path, is what you were just saying. How, and again, this is a very loaded question, but how can AI help those things when you talk about efficiency? Saiful, especially for you, again, from the buy side, like just give us a few examples of how you've seen that work and like best use cases that are tangible versus talking Skynet and Arnold's coming.
Yeah, we're trying to still figure it out, right? Let's be honest. The reality is we're trying to do with AI. You're trying to do more with less, right? That's the key thing. But for us, where our starting point tackling that the reseller challenge is we've made an active decision just to work with 21 SSPs globally. That means that we can control and access trusted sources, suppliers. And then, on top of that, we've got quite a strict QA process, which is both manual and automated, using our proprietary tool, which is Prosecco, and not to mention DSP settings as well. So yeah, for us, AI does play a role. It's still an area that we're trying to figure out. I feel that it's more around inventory curation that we focus our attention. That's definitely become part of the media buy for us. And then, on top of that, it's about understanding what policies are being complied with. And also we talked about ads.txt adoption. That's important to us. And what you described with the ads.txt file just reminds me of the challenges that we face with the keyword block list. It's so much more easier to add than remove. We just don't have the intelligence to know what should be removed sometimes, right? And and what you find is people just continually add to it. So to your point, Mike, it just adds that level of latency. And you raised some interesting points that I want to take back to our partners. That how do they actually audit that? And that's an interesting aspect I'd like to consider, because site performance is super important. You know what it's like as a end consumer. You don't hang around, right? Any sort of any sort of milliseconds that is over time, that you're going to lose out to your competitor set. So all of that plays a role in our client's user journey.
One other just additional comment on the site performance thing. This is not AI in general, but just one thing I think that happens with publishers when they're looking at SPO and they're looking at what's happening, they're looking at basically the pre-bid wrapper that they're putting into their site. And what a lot of publishers don't realize, and what they don't question, is that when they add a new partner, when they add a content recommendation widget, when they add this thing or that thing, there might be other auctions. There might be whole other wrappers, whole other things happening. And a lot of times, publishers aren't even looking there. So it's like a scenario where you can't just be looking at your own stack. You got to be understanding what else is getting injected into your site. What other stack is somebody else running, and what are they doing in that? Obviously, it's present. It's there in the ads.txt file. You could see it. But if you have thousands of entries, then God knows what is running for which pre-bid wrapper, where, when, why. And so questioning is a real key. I think in terms of AI and how we think about it, from the fraud perspective, I think that a lot of the threat models that we see across IVT, across malvertising and all of these things, there's not a net new threat model that's going to come because of Gen AI that we've really seen. But this provides bad actors, whether it's malvertisers or botnets or whatever, a new tool, something else to use against us, something else to enhance what they're already doing. Whether it's a malicious landing page, before somebody had to handwrite that copy, now somebody can do a million iterations, and an image can be tried in many different ways, or something can be used to code a new way to create a botnet. So we're looking at it from that perspective. How can we leverage this to basically continue to combat anyone conducting fraud and other things?
So I want to touch based on AI and say that in 2024, AI is not a buzzword. It's amazing. I had so many meetings in the last 2 days that they told me this year is the best buzzword. AI, it has to be as part of the science. It has to be part of the conversation. AI is not a buzzword. 12 years ago, when I came from the Navy to AdTech, and I asked, okay, teach me, what do I need to know? They told me you need to know Google Sheets. You need to know how to work with Excels and start writing. Okay, if it's Android, this is the price. If it's iOS, this is the price. Let's start. Let's remove it. Let's add it. Okay, then we had rules. Then we had data science. And then we have AI. AI is a huge, huge, huge thing in order to take right decisions. The amount of parameters, when we're looking on a programmatic auction, we have 3 factors. We have the first party data, which is the operation system, browser, device, location, IP, so many different factors, 250 different factors on the first party data. Contextual, where did this user come from? What is he reading? What is the specific content within the page? What are the ads that are being running? How many partners there are within the auction? And also you need to do everything in real time, because you discussed also latency, and that's right, in millisecond, you can lose this partner. So in order to do all those parameters in real time and still be profitable, you need to be very, very, very sophisticated. And I think that's the best thing that happened with the capabilities of AI. Today, you don't need to work hard in order to find something. You're getting very precise answer based on a lot of data layers. So I feel today, being in AdTech and not having the ability to really take decisions based on AI or data science models is having no tools.
Let me just say one more thing, that I don't think AI is a bad thing. Sometimes it can be true. I know we're going to go back to MFAs at some point, so I won't steal your thunder there.
No.
But the point being that AI can be good. It's like fire, right? Everyone thought they discovered fire until they realized that it could burn them and so forth. But for AI, from our perspective, I should have mentioned also creative, right? So clients are saying to us that DCO or DCA, as I've also heard it called, dynamic creative automation, but basically just generating multiple creative versions depending on what audiences you're reaching. The challenge for us, and the thing that we're trying to do, touching on what you said around rules, is how do we ensure that brand guidelines are still adhered to, because that's the challenge, right? And I know the industry is also trying to figure out how do you value AI versus human content, and not just ad but editorial. And that's the thing that we want to do as well about credible journalism, and linking that back to quality in terms of adhering to things like CBA, Coalition of Better Ads, or GDI, or PIPCO. Those things are we're seeing appear in front of us, and those are the challenges we as an organisation and as an industry want to figure out together, because I don't think one side can do it on their own.
It can also help you a lot in achieving demand KPI, because I came from the performance. I was the VP programmatic at IronSource that was bought by Unity and went public. And in performance, it's very easy. You have campaigns, you're running them, you see CPIs, CPAs, 7 days retention, a lot of very important metrics. On the branding campaigns, we talked about viewability, completion rates, CTR, maybe 0 point something is considered good. But it's really hard, because we really want to create brands. We want to create a well-known brand. So we're trying to buy as much as we can and buy quality traffic. But I think we need to dig in a bit more about those KPIs. And I think that from what I'm seeing inside DSPs, the targeting options that we have today are not full enough, are not specific enough in really to understand exactly who is the best user for a specific campaign. And as much as we will have more and more targeting capabilities and more factors to put in the equation, with the ability of AI to take a better decision based on the KPI you as an agency will describe for your campaign, it will achieve your targets much better.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, like, AI is not new, right? AI's been in our industry for over a decade. I worked at an AI...
Decade of mobile,
Yeah,
again.
I worked at an AI company, right? So it's like it's not new. What's happening now is there's an inherent fear of what AI can do to people's jobs, right? And how AI can impact creative, how AI... And that is stalling other areas that it's almost like common sense, because there are companies doing it and winning, right? That you're attaching AI to certain things, that the KPIs are repetitive and stuff like that, that it's very easy to get results and very easy to get efficiency out of it. And, you know, quite frankly, you could start looking at your teams and then start figuring out where you want to deploy. It's not like you're going to have less people. It's your people are going to be deployed doing stuff that's different and probably more important for your company, versus living in an Excel spreadsheet trying to figure out how to get to a 30 cent KPI on something, right? Where, like, companies are doing it, right? And if you know how to do it and you know how to utilize it, it's a tool, right? It's not Skynet, right? You're not worrying about it coming over and taking over the world, not yet at least, right? But for our simplistic view of AI, right, for what we do in our industry, right, it's going to be a little bit different for human because it's a little bit more sophisticated, but for like the inventory side of the house, for like the data side of the house, it's very simplistic applications of AI, right? You just have to have the right data science teams, and again, it gets back to the data that you're feeding into the model in order for it to make decisions, right? And it's not set and forget. The people are going to be continually feeding parameters into the model, right? And that's how the AI evolves and gets smarter over time. And then it is Skynet, but that's the way it works.
And we've come full circle. So, Saiful, you mentioned DCO. Obviously, it goes into a little bit of obviously personalization. The other side of that sword is compliance. And we talked a little bit about this on our pre-call as well, but I want to make sure I get his quote correctly. So Jamie Bernard, the CEO of Compliant, he was just at our event Navigator. He made the point that privacy compliance today will not equal compliance tomorrow. Obviously, it will take a couple of years for the industry's behavior to catch up to what the laws actually expect. We can fumble around trying to keep bad practices in place or start from scratch with new ones. And we talked a little bit about this as well in terms of standardization and how you work with global teams. And you mentioned a couple of best practices that you have in terms of getting those standard globally and then delivering different personalizations to the market. When you, again, bringing it back to the compliance piece of this, how are you factoring that in? Of course, it's an evolving road. What does that look like?
Also, Saiful, when we were talking yesterday, you kind of delved in from a publisher's perspective. I think it would be interesting for them to understand, how do you grade them? How do you go, what things do you use to grade them? And, what are there specific lists? Are there internal ways that you do that? I just think, from a publisher's perspective, it'd be super interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think with most of these things, it's about taking stock of where you are today. I spoke to you guys off in a separate meeting, but what I was trying to get at is that there's standards and values. Clients want us to deliver on digital media quality, but also define standards, right? And we talk about it being the compliant buying universe. And what we need to do is understand, what things that we can do and the things that clients don't want us to do. And there are industry trade bodies that are out there that we are working with to understand, who's been non-compliant against the frameworks that they've set out. On the periphery today is privacy compliance. So clients are saying to us, hey, agency, you've bought that ad on that publisher site. Do they have the same values and standards as I do? And that's important because, on a simple level, do they have a CMP? Do they have an easy opt-out as they have an opt-in? Do they have a data privacy page? All of those things are important because what tends to happen is that creative that sits on their site could be piggybacked by unauthorized pixels and tags. If that arrives on the client's site and is not being registered by the CMP, they could be liable for any GDPR risk and penalties. So that's kind of where we're at. And there are companies that are out there. The key thing with what I'm describing is, and I said to you, Jeff, is that it's a website, domain, and app. We need to, with our intelligence and the technology that we use, we need to figure out if we should target it or not. So in practice, it's enhancing the inclusion-exclusionist principles, but we're bringing a level of intelligence in from other means. But privacy compliance is an area that is becoming important to our client. There is another one, but you told us to stay clear of that subject. So I will stay clear of
Don't listen to me. Go ahead.
It's really hard to be compliant because you need to know the rules.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem is that nobody knows the rules, and sometimes the rules are being dictated by DSPs.
Well, it's interpretation, right? And
Right.
that's
Right.
and everyone's got an opinion in our industry.
I agree, but I'll give an example of human, not because I'm obsessed with human, but I think that human made my life as the CRO much easier. There is one standard of who's vetting the biggest SSPs, DSPs, and publishers in the States and globally. And I know that there is one partner that is agreed upon everyone, and at the end of the month, I know that everything that is being passed most likely will be okay because I choose the vendor and I know he's doing a great job. In other areas, we don't have one single partner that we can really say, okay, This is who we trust. This is how we need to go through. And I asked them all the relevant questions, and I got all the answers I want. And if rules are being sometimes dictated by agencies and DSPs, and SSPs are not 100% sure what they are, and publishers are dealing with a lot of other things, like Dayna said and Mike said, creative, where is content going to? There's so many problems of being profitable on the publisher side. So it's really hard to be on the right side if you don't know necessarily what's happening and where is it going as an industry. I can give an example through pre-bid. Through pre-bid, you can basically pass on the OpenRTB protocol a lot of parameters, a lot of information. But SSPs and DSPs can contain all this information. Nobody knows how to say what is the most crucial information. It's knowledge. Listen, IP is important, cookie syncing is important, the geo is important, but in order to make an efficient programmatic auction, do I need to have 20, 50, or 100 parameters as part of my equation? And some SSPs, I will tell you for a fact, are just cutting the request because it's too much information that they need to digest. And sometimes the most crucial information is in the latter part of the request, and this is why you're not getting an impression in return. So I feel that if we'll talk more about standards between agencies, DSPs, SSPs, and publisher, and make sure that everybody knows the rules, and everybody will make sure that it's not just about MFA. I know we said we're not touching MFAs, or it's not only about ads.txt, reseller, or direct. It's about understanding what the brand and agencies are looking to buy and what the suppliers, the publishers have to sell, and just closing the app.
Yeah, and right now, compliance, everyone has a legal team, and that legal team is giving you their version of where that compliance line is drawn, right? And there's a lot of factors that go into that. Most of them are tied to revenue. Most of them are tied to how that business is operating. That's never going to go away because, quite frankly, that's just the world, right? Everyone's competing. That's your secret sauce. Now you got to figure out how to make your secret sauce compliant, right? And you are right. Like in pre-bid, we're GPP compliant. We're every version of compliance you can have, you can do it in pre-bid, and it's to the letter of the law. We don't interpret the law. It is the law. We work with the regulators. The regulators tell us what to put in. We put it in. Now, a publisher or an SSP or a DSP, what they do with that on their side, they can do what they want, right? So it's their instance of pre-bid. They can cut that. They can add everything into it. And there are business ramifications for doing that right now, right? Like severe business ramifications. So you're having this like world. There's also forgiveness with California compliance and a whole bunch of other stuff that a lot of the publishers, quite frankly, don't understand where the line is, right? And not just the line on privacy, but the line on where the SSP is drawing or the DSP or the buyer cares about. So right now it's a big legal conversation and that's it, but it's not a business conversation, right? Or higher level conversation, a strategy conversation on what we should do as an entire industry because everyone's handling it as individuals.
Another place to put a question mark, alternative IDs. Like I had a discussion with Beeler.Tech a few weeks ago in New York, and we discussed with publishers, and we asked them, which alternative IDs are you using, and based on what? And they said, we took one, we saw if there's an uplift, okay, we continue with it. We took another one, we saw, but what's behind this uplift? What is this alternative ID company doing that cookies are not doing? And what is the information that is being used? What is being passed based on what they're taking decisions? And is it legit or not? I think, again, here we don't have standards. And in the last 2-3 years, we saw hundreds of companies as alternative IDs. Some of them contains a lot of alternative IDs in one solution. Some of them created their own path. But again, if you don't have standards, then at the end of the day, you don't know if it's legit or not legit to pass it to those agencies that are buying and taking decisions based on this data.
And I'll mention MFA, sorry. But you could be privacy compliant and have MFA. It's not shots, it's the truth, right? Like at the end of the day, right, MFA, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into MFA, like if you're spoofing a domain, right, or whatever you're doing, there's fraud attached to it, right? But if you're running a privacy-centric website, the people that are going to the fraud, you're privacy compliant, right? But it's fraud, right? So they're with MFA, there's a lot of gray areas, depending on who you talk to, but the reality is it's all compliant by law from a privacy perspective if you're running your data side of your house properly, right? That doesn't help a buyer, right? When they're seeing, oh, it's compliant, right? And it's beyond fraud, right? So
I mean,
those two have to somehow meet in the middle, right?
obviously the domain spoofing part is probably not kosher, but I mean, yeah, to your point, there's definitely a gray area about that inventory and about what's being
domain
bought.
spoofing.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to the agencies of the world, like, or the advertisers. What do they want to buy? Maybe they do want to buy that, maybe they don't, but clearly I think what we've heard is they don't. So at the end of the day, these things just need to be surfaced and people can make their decision.
We've
Or
got,
maybe I'm
we've
wrong.
We've gone there. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. Like, the tricky part is legitimate, right? There are loopholes. These guys are clever. They are exploiting loopholes. Like, our industry's born on innovation, points of difference. Things will be different. Talk about standards. When it becomes a trend, then we want to reel it back and create standards. But the point being that these guys are exploiting a loophole, and I won't go into Forbes 3, but the point being that, MFA is only MFA if it's linked to arbitrage. Otherwise, it's ad clutter. And what my fear is that, what will get disguised is that underrepresented websites or niche sites that are competing with premium publishers need to serve more ads to the page or ratio of ads to the page than content. And if you bundle MFA and ad clutter together, you're going to disproportionately affect a community and an audience. Otherwise, otherwise that's been affected. So that's the challenge with MFAs. To your point, Mike. Yeah, there's signals that we need to look out for. But you need to look at those signals collectively, not individually. Otherwise, there's a good chance that you're going to alienate a whole section.
And you brought up a good point with some publishers when you're working with third-party resellers. I'm not going to get into semantics and names and stuff like that, but
Please don't.
some of them are doing this, right, without the publisher's knowledge. And the bigger the publisher is and the more partners you have, the harder it is to control what's happening in your world. Right. What we see on our side is a disproportionate amount of impressions being served to someone that doesn't have that audience, right? And that's when we can't accuse them of something, right? It's not our business, right? But it's clear that something's going on because it doesn't match their site traffic, right? Like the impressions being served just don't add up. Right?
Wait for the traffic of in-app bidding, inside the in-app ecosystem. Yeah. It will be 10 times more. But I want to put a question mark regarding MFA. I'm putting domain spoofing aside. It's fraud. Everybody knows that. But MFAs, there are a few companies, I won't mention their names, that were classified 2-3 years ago as MFAs. And I'm asking myself, do those companies just set aside for 3 years, didn't do anything, didn't look on the rules, didn't change anything, didn't launch new sites? Who's defining who is an MFA? And how often does it change? Is it a certain company in the States or in Europe? Is it, what are the questions we're asking about how do you really define what is MFA? What's the proportion between ads to a page? Where do you buy your traffic? 50% of the traffic, it's legit to buy, or 20% or 5%? I'm asking SSPs and DSPs, what do you define as MFA? And nobody knows what to say rather than MFA is bad. But I don't think that closing those 50, 100 companies will solve the problem. Maybe it will reduce it. But,
No.
they will move to other companies. They will produce new companies. We need to have standards in order to really define what is MFA. How can we find the problems? How can we really discuss with him, do whatever we can as an industry to make sure they won't. And the fraud, we will always have fraud in all industries. But at the end of the day, just saying MFA is bad or wrong, I feel like it's making our life easier, but it's not the right decision.
Yeah. There's not a clear publisher. Let's just say the publishers aren't aligned on what MFA is, right? So if you ask a big publisher versus a small publisher versus a mobile one, there's multiple definitions, right? And until that is actually that there's a standard around it, that this is what constitutes MFA, and not just some pithy 2-sentence thing, but actually something that you can go deeper on that can be applied to technology. That's when the SSPs will know what the standard is and they can build to that. What the DSPs will know it, then the buyers will know it, right? Even in pre-bid, we can build something against it. You can't build something if there's not a standard, right? Because then it's just our opinion on what it is.
Ladies and
That will never
gentlemen,
work.
this is why we saved MFAs for last. No, I'm getting the signal to wrap it up. So we can either continue. I know we have some time for questions. Whatever's the best course. questions? Anybody? And you want to hear them keep rapping?
I say up here for hours.
I know you could. Every time you say MFA, you have to take a shot. That's what I meant. I mean, keep going. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
Okay, maybe because
we got
we
another
need to
15 minutes.
really-
I
Yeah.
mean, I would say like in regards to this, I mean, to try and put a cap in it, but I think like if we look at what we opened up this whole conversation with, trust and transparency, we apply that to MFA. I think that transparency is again a route towards looking at this in a more analytic way, like understanding what's going on with these ads to and exposing those type of metrics as the metrics themselves rather than, you know, like, hey, this looks bad, blah, blah, blah. Like exposing what are the actual components that make this thing. What are we concerned about? Is it what Mike said with like too many impressions based on page views? Or is it, you know, how many times this thing refreshes or the ads to content ratio? Like exposing those type of things and then allowing, you know, whether it's an SSP or DSP or an agency to set what they believe fits their paradigm in like a way that makes sense and is transparent to publishers. So if they do want to make those changes, to your point, then they can, and the rules are there. But it all starts with just like transparency. Like, can we lay this stuff out? And it's the same stuff with privacy and all of that. The compliance piece that we were talking about there. These rules are changing. They're tough to understand, as Mike said. The big publishers have legal teams, but like that's like 1% of publishers. The rest of them are like, hey, I should just put in this CMP. Oh, you got a CMP? Cool, I'll put that in there. They don't know what it does. They don't know, you know, if it works better than the other. If it's even if that CMP is doing its job. So, you know, I think it's transparency and question everything is really like.
Yeah, I think transparency with standards builds trust, right? And that's kind of right off the pre-bid website. I didn't just make this up, but that's like how.
Give me credit. Nice job.
I won't take credit for stuff. I just like, you know, whatever. But yeah, that is literally why pre-bid works, right? The transparency is built, right, from everyone having an understanding on what the standards are and what the rules are, and then trust is built in the marketplace based off of that no one is wondering why certain things are happening because the standards are set that you understand them, right? Everyone understands them and everyone's building to them. Right, and that's kind of, and you are right. Like the big publishers have huge legal teams working on this, and then you're gonna have some small publisher that, quite frankly, doesn't even know what MFA is. Right, they might not even know they're doing something wrong. Right, you know, someone comes to them and says, "I can give you 30% more revenue." Sounds like a good deal to me if I'm a small publisher, right? And then they're gonna go do something, and then you're gonna get blown up on some report, right, a quarter later, and have no idea why that happened. Right, so without those standards being set in place, even for those guys, you can't build, right, that trust factor, right? And I think that is the key point, for, you know, that for me, I'm always focused on that. Even for us, we won't build anything unless there's standards, right? There's no point in building something and constantly having to redevelop it, right, based off of someone else's POV on what it should be. Right. So.
I have to say I was really excited towards this panel because we are all providers. We're not the brand, we're not the publisher, we're all giving services to the industry, to the ecosystem. And I have to say that everybody can be replaceable. I worked at the beginning of my industry in an agency that supports gaming brands and did the full funnel of creative and buying media. And then one day, a company like Iron Source came and they developed those capabilities within the company and became bigger. I feel that competition is something good. Competition creates innovation, and we want to see this industry continues to rise, to continue to compete with each other and drive innovation. I feel like in the last couple of years, we are all going with trends that are actually making our industry, in some point, more efficient, but in the other point, creating DSPs that are stronger than what they should be, creating the life of SSPs much harder. And at the end of the day, they are also merging and closing just because they wanna they can't manage anymore. And in my worst dreams, I don't want to see this industry going to a place that 2-3 companies will dominate everything. I want to continue seeing agencies. I want to continue seeing DSPs and SSPs. But I want to ask and put a question mark regarding every company I work with. What is their value? How tech savvy they are? And what's their advantage in a programmatic auction? Unless we will answer in every single company what's their unique value, there isn't a reason for them to exist.
And that's why we need our creative humans who cannot be replaced so easily. All right, guys, we're getting the wrap-up signal, so thank you all for coming. Yeah.